Hi again. So in today's game, what we are going to do, we are going to most likely play black pieces. As last time we have played white pieces, and I believe chess.com keeps the pairing fair. Well, not so much today. We are starting with the move d4. So I'll just turn the board and just bear with me. I will have to have a look if everything's set up correctly for you. We will adjust the board a little bit. That's probably gonna do it. There's like a little black patch on a Mr. Wolf. So just like in our previous game, we are going to try and learn more about Jobava system. Some of the lines that we have been playing so far are giving me a bit of a trouble. And I can see that h6 is g6. G6 move is a bit of an issue for our bishop to be on f4. As this may allow our opponent to, if I place bishop on f4, then knight h5 could attack the bishop, and if I go here, then the h6 happens. If I go here, then the g5 happens. And then we can probably play e4 and dislodge the knight. And this pawn structure around the king will be very weak. So yes, I believe we can try and do bishop f4 and not to worry too much about knight h5. It's possible that I'm running into something, as I don't really know how Jobava should approach some of these positions, but I'm going to look into the ways how to learn this opening. And I'm starting to believe if black doesn't address the situation in the center, then probably we should. But I also feel that move like queen d2 might be quite useful. And I don't know yet what the black wants to do, how he wants to react to our moves. But I'm feeling somewhat that we should grab the center right now. With the move e4. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sure if this is the best way to play. Black is most likely planning to play a move like d6. Until that happens, maybe we can develop our queen. But if we put queen on d2 and he plays knight h5, we play bishop g5 after h6 and bishop h4 and g5. Well, we can then sacrifice the bishop on g5, play queen g5, but now this knight will be protected. So I still suggest we play e4. Yes, I suggest we play e4 and see what's going to be the response of our opponent. If d5 is played, I feel like we should support the pawn with the f3 move. d6 is being played. So the opponent may want to play knight h5 and eventually e5. But right now I feel like we should go with the long castle strategy to place the bishop onto h6. If the knight h5 will be too uncomfortable, we can always drop the e3. I would suggest, or I would suppose, that black's strategy will be to play h6 in these positions, but then it's very difficult for them to castle. And also maybe we can play f3, g4, h4, h5 and try and storm the black's kingdom. It will also be very difficult to find a good space, good active space for the bishop. So on g4 we can always push the bishop away. On bishop e6 we can always push forward and make them retreat all the way here. The knight here is probably going to live here or on a6. Quite a few dodgy places for black. Black's probably best try is to play c5. But then again, it's very difficult to do right now as they're under a little bit of pressure. I actually wish this knight could disappear, for example, here. So we have more scope there if the pawns get exchanged in the middle. I believe this is a very uncomfortable position for black at the moment. That doesn't mean that we are up on the clock. We are down 2 minutes to them. We have 11 minutes left. And my opponent is 986 rated. And what it looks like, they're from Algeria. I'm not 100% sure about that flag, but I believe it's Algeria. And the name is Good Luck in some sort of brackets. And the time is ticking. I like when the timer goes around, it goes in quarters. So you have 4 seconds per turn. I think the display and the board has been really well made. I think the display itself is what made me choose this product. But obviously some other features as well that ChessUp is offering. So now that black is castling, I feel we should go for the pawn storm ideas. So what I want to be able to do is to play bishop h6 without knight g4 ever happening. But what I can also do maybe is to play knight f3. I have now so many plans. I can play the Yugoslav attack with the f3, g4, h4. At least that's what I think they call it when you play some sort of Sicilians. But definitely I believe I should not start any attacks before I castle. So I think my number one priority should be to sort out my castling rights. It also prevents all the possible pushes because I'll be twice attacking the queen. So let's castle to begin with. I know when I mention Yugoslav attack, it's with f3 and usually the bishop sits on e3. But yes, I know theory only a very little bit, so most of the time when you see me playing, I'm trying to cook something up. I'm also not sure. I believe our bishop would look really beautiful on c4 in this line. But then again, I want to avoid any a6 and b5 pushes. So at the moment, if this pawn is attacked by the knight, I will go with the knight to e2. Knight develops there, and now the pushes may be possible, but I still have this long diagonal for myself, so it may not be all that possible for my opponent to make a push, but we need to calculate this correctly because any mistake could be costly at this stage. Now I believe bishop h6 can be played already, but I will be considering also so if e5 is played, I can take on e5. If knight e5, then bishop e5, pawn e5, queen d8 wins. If e5 is played, I take here with the pawn, he takes with the pawn, I can take with the bishop. And he cannot recapture because the queen will be lost. So I will win, in both of these cases, I will win at least an exchange. That means rook for a bishop. If c5 is played and I take, and he takes with a knight, then I could be pushing e5, but e5 runs into knight to h5. And then I am the one who's losing the pawn. But then again, if knight h5 is being played, I can take on d6. He takes on f4, and I play queen takes f4. And I believe that should be winning a pawn as well, but then there's also a move like bishop c3, ruining my pawn structure around the king. So, and hanging maybe possibly this pawn. So with regards to c5, then maybe I can push forward with the d5. Or just support the pawn with the knight to e2. But then if you take, I take with a knight, then you have a e5 push. But since the bishop is no longer protecting this square, I believe now it could be possible to play bishop h6, as on knight g4, I already have a response to it with queen h4 and such. So yes, I believe we will start with this move, even though it's not a developing move, but at least it prevents us from... Yeah, it probably didn't make sense to play that move. I really need to study this opening a bit in more detail. The idea is also, if I can help it, to let the bishop sit there, but I think I should have played f3 first. That's a key move in this type of attack. So now that the e5 happened, there is also an opportunity to take on e5. If knight takes e5 happens, to play bishop g7 and f4, kicking that knight. So I believe this is what we want to do, to open the D file. We need to take first on g7, because if we play f4, then black has bishop h6, which is a very strong move. Knight takes. So now I believe is the time to play bishop g7. King takes. That was almost pre-move, I believe. And now we can try and grab more center with a move like f4. If knight g4, that would only help us, because we can kick the knight again, and when it goes here we play g4, and the attack is too strong. So I believe the best square is to go to c6. But then again we can push the pawn to e5. Oh no, in this case from knight c6 the knight is already being protecting the queen, so that's not gonna work. I'm thinking if bishop g4, oh, bishop g4 would be a mistake, because we could take the knight straight up. So as e5 is not possible, I suppose we should still play move like h3 first. So we can prepare a move like e5. By going king to b1. Because after king b1, if we then have the chance to play e5 first, then he can capture back, we can capture back, but if queen takes d2, we have e takes f6. But I think it's a too wild plan, so we will first go h3 and try to push with the g4 idea, and also develop the rest of our pieces on some favorable squares. If bishop e6, we will just simply play king b1 to prevent any captures on a2. Just this pawn. And yeah, then we want to push g2 to g4. If knight h5 happens with idea to go here, then we will play queen f2 and then kick the knight, so that's good for us. We can also in some cases seize the d5 square. So that's probably what we need to fight for. We need to fight for the d5 square at the moment, and more for the pawn push on the side and also in the center, because whoever is going to control the center is most likely going to win the game. And once the bishop sits here, the move like f5 will be very strong to open the position against the king. So he plays very moderately. I already feel like we shall start scaring our opponent a little bit with the move g4. The reason I play g4 is because I maybe want to play knight to g2, knight to e2, and then reroute it to here, so then I can push the g5. Black is going to try and counterattack, which I believe should be slower. But I like to prepare my own attack, and when a g5 happens, then I can... Okay, I'll go with my plan. If black plays a4, I will simply stop it with a3, or maybe I can even let the pawn go all the way to a3, and in some cases maybe even let it to take, but I want to slow down his attack, so that's what I'm going to be aiming for. One of the plans that I can deploy is also to play knight to d4, and if he trades, then I have a g5 as a very strong attack. I have 4 minutes and 53 seconds, so hopefully in the time pressure I don't make a mistake like the end of game 1. And I'm really impressed how 1900s are playing these days on chess.com. There's some really, really decent play on their part. And I believe, yes, this is actually a very strong plan to put my knight in here and trade for the knight on c6. My opponent isn't going to do so. I think they want to support the b5 push or play maybe bishop c6. But would I also believe that now I can make a push on e5 and win a pawn? Because black cannot, if I push the pawn forward, black cannot recapture, because when I recapture, they will be leaving this bishop unprotected. So jumping away with the knight allows me this push. Otherwise this square was protected enough. So I think we are going for the kill. We just need to see if there's some jumps with the queen here to there. But at worst we are giving one of these pawns in order to win one of these pieces. And we can recapture on d6 when the knight moves to e8. But also we can maybe push the knight onto d5, which is also going to be very strong. So definitely push the pawn. Might be a little too early, but it shouldn't cost us anything. Oh, but black may have could play bishop c6 in some cases, but he doesn't have a time. If he plays bishop c6, we take with the check. So this counterattack on our rook doesn't simply work. Knight retreats. black is still unable to capture on e5. But we are equally don't want to take on d6, so maybe developing a bishop to g2. Yes, I think e5 was probably too early. So maybe I feel, as they still cannot recapture on e5, we will go with our plan of bringing the knight here, and we are going to push the f5 pawn. We have 2 minutes left, so I might need to speed up my chess game a little bit. We don't mind having rook here, as it's looking directly at the king. Taking here would be a big mistake. And this knight is now a little bit stuck. So our next move is definitely to play f5. And I'm starting to feel like we have a really strong attack brewing. So we have spent most of our time in this until this stage. But now we have an attack that's very strong for our opponent to meet. So this is where sometimes, you can go wrong if you don't proceed with your plan of counter-attack on our side, or if you, sort of fall into too much defensive tasks at some point. And knight a7 seemed to be the key to his problems now. However, now that I'm in this time trouble, I need to start playing much quicker. So, black finally attacks. And we definitely counter-attack with the move f5. b4, so our knight needs to go forward. We still don't need to worry about the recapture, as that is simply not possible, because queen d8 wins material. And after we push the pawn to f6, I believe our attack will be impossible to meet. So black makes this mistake. We're going to capture the queen. So we want a free rook at this stage for a pawn. The knights are protecting each other, so that's a good thing. And we still actually continue to have a strong attack. If you play knight to f6, we can capture first the rook and then the knight, so that's going to be difficult to meet. And that's exactly what happens, so black is losing more material. Okay, so black is going to try and recapture here. But now what we need to do is simply we are up a piece at this stage. We cannot attack any of their pieces. The bishop is actually, and bishop and the knights are working quite well together. So, and we cannot attack any of their pieces with our rook. However, it's most sensible to save our rook. The knight is being protected. So we start with the saving operations first. We still have 1 minute 30, so I really need to speed up. And the way to win this game will be just to trade more pieces. And once this happens, we will have 2 rooks against the knight, which should be fairly simple technique. Knight goes there, which is interesting. So we're definitely going to offer a trade of pieces. The knights are sometimes uncomfortable to play against, but I can always give 1 rook for the knight. And 1 of the pawns. Okay, so I feel now I shall, maybe I can just take the knight, take with the pawn. Okay, we will do exactly that. We will take a pieces. Black will recapture. We will take with the bishop. And the idea is that the knight, once it jumps to e4, will be protecting the dark squares. So the trade happens, the knight move happens. Now also another thing, if we are getting attacked, we will push the f6 pawn first, so the black king will lose any standing in that position. He goes to f8, so we will set up a little trap and attack at the same time the pawn, and black bites. And now we have 1 minute and 30 seconds to find the final move, and I believe it will be quite simple to find. You just need to find a mate in 1. If you can find this, just let me know in the comments. I'll give you a few more moments. So as you can see, that the pawn f6 move that I did was quite useful in the end, and a simple way to win some of the games is like when black is desperate, when the other side is desperate, they will take almost any piece. We had extra rook, now we gave a piece for a simple checkmate. So with 50 seconds to go, we are going to light up the board with our checkmate. You can see the rook can go all the way to the king, and the pawn is protecting these 2 squares. So we have to say GG to our opponent, but we were able to beat them, but they were playing way above their level for quite some time. It seems like lots of people is doing quite a good job when they are studying their openings, but when it comes to a late middle game or end game, that's where they are lacking the skills. And I believe the worst thing that you can do, even if you are playing stronger player, is to continue playing your games after, you know, being down a lot of material. I do appreciate this opponent played, because they did quite a lot of strong moves and were not so easy to break down. However, there was a mistake that happened eventually, with which will happen if you are constantly under pressure, and that's why the openings that they played with d6 and g6, they are very tricky, but I would not necessarily recommend them. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one.